This is a CNA podcast.
Here's a fun fact. Do you know how many Tesla cars were registered in Singapore in 2012? One. Yep, just one. Well, fast forward 10 years later, and 1 in 10 cars purchased in the first half of 2022 were electric vehicles, with a total of nearly 1,000 Teslas now registered here. The government has pledged to have all vehicles run on cleaner energy by 2040. Efforts to achieve this include incentives and rebates, as well as building infrastructure to encourage more drivers to switch to electric vehicles on our roads. But this wasn't always the case. Hello and welcome to the Climate Conversations. I'm your host, Julie Yoo. Today, we're going to talk about electric cars, and my guest is the first person to own a Tesla in Singapore. From being a refugee of the Vietnam War to sinking roots here in the Lion City, Nguyen has quite a story. Welcome, Joe. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Julie. Glad to join the Climate Conversation.
We've had a pretty fascinating and incredibly dynamic life, to say the least, from being a refugee from the Vietnam War to graduating from Princeton and being the first Tesla owner in Singapore, and now the president of Tesla Owners Club here. That's quite a journey. Tell us a bit about how you ended up here in Singapore.
Oh my gosh, how I ended up is interesting. I went to America, I didn't speak English, and this was 1980. I'm 51 years old. I lived through the Cold War. I lived through the 80s. I studied engineering, and I was supposed to be an engineer. And then I took 1 year off to go to Singapore in 1993 on an exchange program at Nguen Poly to be a lecturer. And I came here, and I was like, wait, I don't want to be an engineer. And then I got into media. And that's how I stayed in Singapore. I got married. I went into digital, and then I got really technical in the early days of the dot-com era with startups and stuff. And then I got into e-commerce. And anyway, the last 10 years or so has been more in media. As a technologist, I'm a mechanical engineering major from one of the top universities. So when electric cars came out, I'm like, okay, what is this? What does it mean? And actually, the car that everyone knows me for is not the first Tesla on the road. It's the second Tesla on the road, the Model S. The first Tesla is actually a roadster, a bright red roadster that I brought in at the end of 2012, the first Tesla registered in Singapore.
So why Tesla? Because when Tesla first came out in the US, many thought it was going to fail, it's going to go bankrupt. It was just a crazy Silicon Valley company trying to do the impossible, although now every automaker is trying to come up with an electric car. But did you see that coming? What was so exciting about it?
It wasn't necessarily Tesla initially. The first one, we understood that the performance of a car is just like any other car. It drives like a normal car. It's just much quieter, and acceleration's much faster, a lot more fun. But as a mechanical engineer, it makes sense. Electric cars have been around for ages. They're called remote-controlled toys.
Okay, I like that.
Everyone's had them growing up. The little things you roll out. That's an electric car. It is that simple. It's got a motor. It's got a battery. So the simplicity of it, the less moving parts and everything. From an internal combustion engine, which is a normal car, what we've done with the internal combustion engine is amazing as humans. What we've developed and optimized it to where it is. But there is a limit as to what we can do with an internal combustion engine. We're exploding fuel. It's a mini explosion. You're pumping petrol in, you're squirting it in there, you're blowing it up. It creates the work that drives the car. You look at that, you're like, wow, what we've done with that. And then you look at an electric car and you're like, oh, that's so simple. Have you ever opened up remote control cars because when they break, it replace the battery, or you're like, oh, that's it. There's just a little thing here, and then there's the battery, and then the wheel drives. It's gone.
So, Joe, take me back to 2015 when you decided to import a used Tesla Model S from Hong Kong. I guess what you didn't see coming was tons of paperwork and inspections, a $15,000 carbon emissions surcharge by the authorities in Singapore. It was quite an ordeal, wasn't it?
Yes, it was annoying. The first car was quite easy. It took a couple months, and it was on a different scheme, and it was 40% off par, which is actually quite a decent incentive. But by the time it rolled around to 16, when I got the Model S in, it was a different scheme. And the whole LTA / Vicom and all that stuff, they just didn't know what to do. I'm supposed to go for inspection, but they've never seen one. They never had to deal with one. Because the test bed electric cars that Singapore had went through a different process. They just didn't know what to do. They didn't have the right equipment even.
So this incident eventually caught the attention of Elon Musk, who stepped in, reached out to Prime Minister Lee Hsien-loong on the matter. What was going through your head then?
Well, that was kind of nutty. That was kind of crazy. I got the car in. I need to get it on the road. It's taking too long. I'm working. I used to fly 200 days a year. I was busy. And then things take longer. And it was just like, okay, by the time the 6 months in, they were like, okay, everything's done, except you need to pay this penalty. Instead of getting a rebate for having zero emissions, I had to pay $20,000 because my car was considered inefficient. And I argued with them. I wrote to my MPs, I did all this stuff, and there was no resolution. So I'm like, okay, you know what? It's 7 months, just pay, get it on the road. So I just paid the fine, got it on the road. And then I was talking to a journal, Rahil, and he did a very short piece for Tech TV, just sort of outlined what happened. And it just went viral. All the car guys picked it up, Jalopnik picked it up, and then it became mainstream. Then by the end of the week, Elon Musk called the Prime Minister. The reason why, one, he had the number, and two, Prime Minister had visited Elon Musk at the factory and had a tour of Tesla. And so he comes back, and then a month later, he gets a call. And apparently, again, I'm not in the room, but Elon says, like, my car's not that inefficient. I don't know how you guys test it. It wasn't about me. It wasn't about the fine. It's like, my car's not that inefficient. So he was more upset that the car was tested wrong more than anything else.
Did you get to talk to Elon Musk?
I've actually been to the Gigafactory when they opened, the one in Utah. I've actually seen him during my travels. I've seen him in Shanghai, coming out of the same hotel I was staying. I see a fleet of Teslas drive up. I'm like, Tesla! And then I'm like, hey, what's going on? I'm like watching, and then security comes, and I'm like, oh, big, huge guys with sunglasses. And then Elon kind of rushes out, and I'm like walking over, and security guys are like,
I'm Joe from Singapore.
I'm like, come on, you know who I am. No, you don't.
So, Joe, thinking back, would you have done the same if you'd known it was going to take that much money and time?
Oh, yeah. I knew from the beginning that it was going to go that way, and it will go that way. As a technologist, I have a longer view on some of these things. Electric cars are just straightforward. It will. Maybe it's not 50 years, maybe it's 100 years, but it will happen. And now it's going to happen faster, whether it's the climate change and everything. But we can't keep on exploding petrol. There is going to be a limit somewhere. We need different renewable energy. We need to figure out what that is.
So I guess after your incident, followed by the government's start-stop approach to electromobility, some prospective EV buyers have been staying away. They've been feeling unsure about EV's future in Singapore. But fast forward today, 1 in 10 cars purchased in the first half of 22 were electric vehicles. I mean, does this come as a surprise to you? What do you think triggered that change?
Obviously, the government policy, I think in 2035, we will stop selling ICE cars here. So that's pure internal combustion engine. There'll still be hybrids. The battery going into a car is happening. Whether it's the only thing that powers the car, which is the trend, or there'll be a period where there's a mix of hybrids and plug-in hybrids. I've always said Singapore is the first and only market that can do this in 10 years. By something called COE. It can phase out all cars in 10 years and force new COEs to be signed on at a different rate. So of all the countries that could do it, Singapore has the legal system and legal ability to actually do it. When you say to people about Singapore, like, it's an ideal place for EVs. Why is it not there? It's more ideal than Hong Kong. Hong Kong has more Teslas. Why is that? Singapore is ideal. It's small, it's short, you don't have to worry about charging, you can always be connected anywhere.
So when you talk to the other Tesla owners, what are the main reasons why people are buying EVs?
I think there's the novelty aspect. There's the branding aspect for Teslas in particular. The environment is a big factor. Money, how much a car is, and that's the first factor. And then, okay, what brand do you want? Why do you want to be associated with this brand? Yes, the Tesla brand talks about sustainability, talks about sustainable transport. So there is that huge component of people buying that into Tesla. And then Volvo has one now. Obviously, the Chinese ones have brought a number of them in. There's a lot more selection now. And then people will start to say, okay, we're choosing electric. And so they are choosing electric for those reasons. Obviously, the top brand is currently Tesla. That's for a number of reasons. The software integration is beyond anything that other manufacturers are currently doing. Like, I've controlled my car from my phone since 2016. My wife is like, hey, I'm at the car. I've got baggage. Okay, unlock. Okay, done. Lock. All right, come back and meet me at the coffee shop. The ability to just have access to it when you're in it, to control everything from the car door to the windows to the music that's on Spotify, all that stuff is one OS. Yeah, it's not Apple CarPlay. And that to me is something that's very cool that the other manufacturers have yet to catch up.
Hi, my name is Sarah Alcaldi, and I'm the host of a new podcast called Money Talks. Yes, we will be talking about money, but more than that, we'll also be talking about life, personal choices, lucky breaks, and how money is the thread running through it all. So look out for our episodes wherever you get your podcasts.
Now, momentum seems to be gathering pace, but the take-up for EVs is still 1 in 10, which means it's still appealing only to a minority of customers. And in fact, Joe, BMW did a survey and found that 54% of car owners are not ready to switch to an electric vehicle. What do you think is still holding so many drivers back?
Everyone's waiting for a charging infrastructure. Everyone wants to see more chargers going up, particularly when you don't have a landed property and don't charge at home, right? You need to rely on public charging, and which is what most people will have to do. Accessibility to that and changing your schedule isn't, okay, well, I'll go there and I'll plug in. I know where to plug in. When there's more ability to plug in the condos, in all malls, more parking lots are dedicated, all that stuff, and then people will be less concerned about that. I don't think there's a concern at the moment because I think we have more chargers per car than in Hong Kong.
So I hear that you charge your EV primarily at home. What does it take to install a private EV charging station right at your doorstep?
There are many people offering the services these days. Tesla Owners Club, we have partners who offer solutions on installing and maintaining and all that kind of stuff. I think installation is about $3,000. It varies. Depending on the charger, mine does about 40 kilometers of charge per hour.
Okay.
And I can plug it in 3 hours later, I'm full or something like that, right? That's a night charger. It's like my phone. I plug in my phone, I plug in my car.
Right, that makes sense. Yes.
We also charge outside as well, whether it's green lots, which is now Shells, or SP. You just go find the right one. Okay, go and pay for it in your app.
Some point to range anxiety as one of the key obstacles. This means the fear that the car's battery will die mid-trip. Has that ever happened to you or anyone who owns a Tesla that you know of?
Everyone, when they first get it, has that range anxiety. And they have to just learn that it's not an issue. So once it creeps down to below 100 kilometers, you're like, oh, okay. But Singapore is so small. The worst you can do is get towed somewhere. I never had to get towed anywhere because I ran out of electricity. My car has 400 kilometers range. It's like a week. I don't have to worry as much. But other people who live in condos who need to figure out charging, yeah, there'll be a period where they're kind of worried. And until your comfort level is like, okay, I'm going to charge the next day, it's a mindset change. It's a real concern. Is it a real problem? No.
What would you say to those people who argue that EVs are no better, that they have a larger carbon footprint than typical cars, citing lithium-ion batteries that tend to be more sort of resource intensive to make? What would you say to them?
Sure. At the beginning of any technology, it's going to have that curve of investments, of R&D. These car factories have been around for ages. They're out of the equation when you have a new car because it's been there, it's kind of built in. Well, now there's a new factory, now there's a new way of doing things. So yes, in the short term, it's going to seem like it's taxing more the environment as things are being developed. You can say a carbon footprint is high. Well, not because I'm driving it, not because I'm plugging in. And by the way, I'm paying for all the carbon footprint through my electricity bill anyway. You're not paying for the externality of dumping CO2 into the air, into the city. That's an externality that you don't get taxed for. You get taxed for petrol for economic reasons on how the country runs. But has the country counted in that externality of carbon dioxide dumping out of a car? I would say it hasn't because it's charging me the same road tax. It's actually higher road tax for an EV than for an internal combustion engine. So I would say that Singapore hasn't taken that into account, the externality of carbon dioxide spewing directly into the city.
All right. So, Joe, as a person who had a sort of front row seat to watch the transformations unfold, how hopeful are you that EVs will be the technology that will finally wean us off from fossil fuels?
I think car ownership would change. I would say 10 years when cars are driving themselves. Ownership of a car doesn't matter. Fractional ownership of a car could be interesting. I could buy a car, and then when I'm at my office, the car goes out and makes money for me doing Grab automatic driving, and it comes back because I'm like, oh, I have a lunch appointment. I'm scheduled to come back. It comes back and picks me up. That kind of ownership changes. How it's powered becomes irrelevant to a consumer. But from an industry perspective, it'll be easier to control autopilot, and it'll be a commercial decision on moving to EVs and being able to back up that automated car, charge it somewhere, it comes back, it's ready. The whole fleet will be like that. So I think car ownership would change. America is different. Everyone's going to have a car. Everyone loves stuff. But in Singapore, in cities, why would you own a car when you can own a fractional ownership of a car and have it ready when you need to? Like the Jetsons. Did you ever watch the Jetsons growing up?
No. Enlighten me.
It's a cartoon, a future of family. It's a flying car that just comes wherever they need it. And then, then it zooms off, it drops them off, and then it goes and parks itself. You don't have to worry about parking. So I think mobility changing, Grab will start changing. Electric cars will just sort of happen because it's just easier to manage a fleet.
Anyone who wants to buy EV, if there's one thing that you like to say to them, what would it be, Joe?
We really have to think about what we contribute to society and how we do little things to change. This will happen. And whether you're on it now or later, you will be there. And it's just part of the future. The other thing when we're talking about climate change beyond cars and EVs is just consume less.
I love that.
Just consume less stuff. We're so ready to consume more things. Just consume less things. Let's package things less. Just consume less. I eat 1 meal a day these days.
Wow.
I'm going to live to 100. That's the plan. I have a plan to live to 100. I'm 51 years old. And that means I need
You're
to
halfway
be
there.
physically fit. Yeah, I need to be physically fit. I need to be mentally fit, financially fit, and all that stuff. Part of that is just how do you live your life? Just consume less. Consumers are the ones that are actually driving everything. But to do your part for the environment as a consumer, just buy less.
Yeah.
Consume less. That's how they actually contribute.
Okay. Well, what a great message to end on. Thank you so much, Joe, for your time. Really enjoyed talking to you.
Thanks, Julie. Good to chat with you.
Well, thanks to my guest, Joe Nguyen, and thanks to all of you for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Now do remember to subscribe and like this podcast so you know when a new episode drops. You can find CNA's climate and sustainability coverage online at cna.asia. The team behind this podcast is Joanne Chan, Jacqueline Chan, Daniel Lee, and Crispina Robert. And I'm Julie Yoo, signing off.
Woodhouse Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram is bringing you more this holiday season, finishing the year with big savings on the entire model lineup during the Wrap Up the Year sales event. Save up to $13,000 off MSRP on a 2024 Ram 1500 Crew Cab Laramie 4x4 for qualified buyers. Explore all our year-end lease and finance deals at WoodhouseCDJRBellevue.com or WoodhouseChryslerJeepDodge.com. This is Woodhouse. With approved credit, tax title license extra. When financed with Chrysler Capital. $299 doc fee due at signing. Stock number BC240134. Offer expires 12/31/2023. See dealer for details.